these films are really starting to fall off the wagon now. You remember yesterday when I talked about how Nightmare on Elm Street 4 had some high points, but that I wasn't always completely on the same wavelength as it? And you remember how I concluded that ultimately that didn't matter, as regardless of what I perceived to be its flaws, it was the absolutely perfect Nightmare movie for that exact moment of time during its release? Well, apparently I can't say the same about Nightmare 5. 4 might not have always been to my personal taste, but I recognise what it was doing. 5 though? It's just messy. I would consider this to be Freddy's first outrightly bad movie, which, to Nightmare's credit, that's a pretty good streak of good entries before you hit your first really bad one. Not many slasher series can say they did that. I would love to say that 5 was maybe like 2, a little misunderstood, or like 4 did some really interesting things on the whole, even if it wasn't to my taste, but with 5, well, there's tiny little slivers of interesting ideas leak through the cracks every now and then, but overall as a whole piece, this film is kind of a chore to get through. It is easily the one I remember the least, and I have not long watched this film. In fact, I literally watched this film specifically to write this video, but it's already kind of blurring together in my mind, which is kind of wild considering the batshit bonkers on paper plot is about Freddy using an unborn child's dreams to claim new victims and features scenes of a weird little Freddy baby running around a hospital floor, and rather infamously a comic book styled Super Freddy dueling a vigilante hero in a stylized black and white world that mixes the set stylings of the Dick Tracy movie with the kind of animation that's reminiscent of the music video for Aha's Take on Me. You would think that any movie featuring this level of nonsense might not be particularly good, but at least it would be somewhat entertaining or memorable. But it's not. Not really. The sentiment behind this movie was at least kind of coming from a clever place. Originally, the idea of this film's basic storyline was pitched during pre-production of The Dream Warriors, but the executive producer Sarah Risher was pregnant at the time and very much not a fan of the idea of Freddy clawing his way out of some poor woman's womb. However, years later, when it came time to make this film, she realised that a lot of the younger audience who watched Freddy in the first movie would probably be grown up now and having kids of their own, and thought maybe this kind of issue would appeal to the fears of that audience, and possibly be a concept worth revisiting for this release. Unfortunately though, the end result is a mixed bag that, to me at least, weighs a lot more negative than it does positive. As always with these films, it's a great special effects showcase, but the highs of these crazy creative dream displays are fewer and further between, it feels, than usual, and the in-betweens that get us there are really wonky. Trying their best to emulate the music video stylized success of the previous movie, but meshing it with dark gothic inserted visuals in a much darker tone that, in my opinion, does not at all gel well. The film opens with sexy boy Dan, as all Dans are famously known to be, and Alice, the Dream Master and fourth movie's final girl, now dating. Everything is peachy until Alice starts to have a weird nightmare experience of nearly drowning in an overflowing shower, which after escaping leads to visions of herself as a nun with the name tag Amanda Kruger. Because oh boy, oh goody, we're really heavily revisiting that bastard son of a 100 maniac storyline I hated in the third movie. Only this time, we get to see a lot more of what happened, as this time round the visual depiction of a dungeon looking asylum plays out in real time, and it's full of dangerous looking men who we get to see attack a young nun. I don't like it. Thankfully these sequences don't go too graphic, but they still crop up a lot more than I'd like. And every time they do, the film series stops being fun and starts being depressing and miserable. Which just feels totally at odds with a film that also gives us this doggy shit.
Faster than a bastard maniac. More powerful than a loco madman.
The next day, Alice is graduating with her friends from the fourth movie, only, wait, no, those guys are all dead. Oh, sorry, I meant her new friends who are almost completely carbon copies of her friends from the fourth movie. You've got Mark, the comic book fan who kind of fills in the slot of the dorky playfulness of 4's Rick. You've got Yvonne, the responsible hospital volunteer and swimmer who fills the committed good student role of Sheila. Dan is, well, he's literally a returning love interest, so I'll cut them some slack there and say he doesn't count. And finally Greta, who to the film's credit is quite different to Tough Girl Debbie in that she's an aspiring but reluctant model, but she still bears some superficial similarities in that she exhibits a similar role of being the confident, self-assured girl of the group. After graduation, Alice has another vision, this time seeing Freddy's grisly looking birth, which is where we get the definitely jumping the shark little Freddy baby. No thank you. If Elm Street 3 over-explained his origins and added mythos that was never needed, Elm Street 5 here is over-explaining the over-explanation. This is shit we already know, that we didn't need to know in the first place, and that when visually presented and meant to come off as brooding and dark, instead just communicates to me as hokey. I mean, it's a baby Freddy. I know it's a surreal vision, I know this isn't actually a beat-for-beat play-by-play of exactly what happened and more just a dreamlike representation of it, but it's just too damn silly. After this, baby Freddy quickly morphs into adult Freddy and taunts Alice. Concerned at what these visions mean, Alice tries to contact Dan, who starts to make his way to her, but he falls asleep and, in one of the few creative moments I like quite a bit in the film, he rides off on a motorcycle in a nightmare which then fuses to his body in this horrible, almost Tetsuo the Iron Man-like fashion, basically turning him into this freakish combination of man and motorbike, which I know when I say that aloud sounds kinda silly and shark jumpy in the same way Freddy Baby does, but unlike Freddy Baby, the visual here is excellent, even with a bunch of MPAA cuts taking away a lot of the gorier elements. This nightmare kills Dan, and Alice finds out after his death that she's pregnant with his child, and also, while staying in hospital, is visited by a young lad called Jacob, only for Yvonne to tell her that there's no kids staying on this floor. Worried about herself and her friend's safety, she tells them about Freddy and all this nun-birth crazy stuff. Yvonne doesn't buy it, but the others are kinda like, sure, yeah, maybe. And then naturally, the nightmare killing begins. First up is Greta, the reluctant model who dreams of snapping at her controlling mother in front of all of her guests before Freddy appears and, in keeping in thematic line with her mother managing her diet so much, kills her by what I consider to be the single grossest death in a nightmare movie. Yes, worse than the cockroach, by force feeding and over engorging her on food. I kinda don't enjoy this. As good as the practical effects may be, even with some of the more cartoony qualities to the makeup, this just makes me feel a little bit sick. Like, I recognise it's great work and it's doing its job, but I'm genuinely repulsed by it. Especially in the uncut version of the scene where he starts feeding her own guts, like, ugh. I feel kinda gross even talking about it. That's just me though. Plot-wise and effect-wise, this is a perfectly thematically appropriate and visceral death in keeping in tone with the movie, even if some of it looks slightly goofy, but it just doesn't play as fun for me. It's weird because I'm not into gore, but the gory stuff has never bothered me in these movies, but there's just something about the act of force feeding that's like genuinely distressing to me on a soul level. After Greta's death, Mark starts to buy into the idea of Freddy a lot more, and that's when Freddy goes for him next. But Alice is able to jump into his dream and save him just before seeing Jacob again, who implies Alice is his mother? Okay. Getting real convoluted on this whole unborn child thing now, aren't we? Not like offensively so, but this film is focusing a lot more on weird lineage mythology than I think anyone would like it to. And then Alice gets an ultrasound and realizes that Freddy is using her power to kill her friends through the dreams of the unborn baby in her womb, as well as feeding the baby their souls to turn it into Freddy. And wow, what's that in the sky? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a shark. And that is quite the jump it's doing there. Bravo, my friend. The plot of this film borders somewhat on the nonsensical. Like, I do get what's happening, it all, I guess, makes sense, but it's so contrived and convoluted, what with soul-eating babies and future visions of unborn kids, and somehow this all ties into Freddy baby. It's all very, very messy, isn't it? Like, it really is a throw something in there so we can get from point A to point B, where A is one special effect and B is another special effect. The film's more or less a practical effects showreel, and a mixed one at that, loosely tied together with this kind of fan wiki lore-esque synopsis of a plot that drives into overly elaborate backstory, mythos, unnecessary details, and pathetic side characters. It is, in a word, naff. It's just a bit rubbish, innit? And it's really no surprise, to be honest, when you hear about the behind the scenes, because apparently this thing was being written and rewritten a million times throughout pre-production. And not in the way that a film would normally be. You'd expect multiple polishing drafts of any film worth its salt. But I'm talking past from writer to writer, each one not having a clue how to fix the previous draft, creating this kind of game of screenplay telephone that was so messy, the Writers Guild of America had to intervene to work out who should even be credited. And apparently, the original draft was super weird according to the director, which is saying something because the end result is also pretty damn weird too. And it's about to get weirder, as there is still a lot of strangeness left to come. Dan's parents think Alice has lost it and come to ask her if they can raise the baby, to which Alice's father steps in and defends her. And you know what? In a small little detail I like to praise in this movie, I like that the dad cleans up his act and gets sober. It's a nice and unexpected little touch to see that alcoholic of 4 trying to do right by his daughter in 5. Just cool to see the character didn't stagnate, and it's something refreshingly optimistic within the film's otherwise pretty cynical tone. Unfortunately, I can't praise it much after that though, as the rest of the film swiftly follows with more backstory rubbish about Amanda Kruger hanging herself after her son's final trial, a wonky stop motion set piece where Yvonne is attacked for the first time, which, listen, I adore stop motion animation, but this just looks terribly out of place here. And then Mark's death, which obviously has the aforementioned embarrassingly terrible Super Freddy. To its credit, the scene does open kind of promisingly, with Mark finding a comic depicting the events of the film up to that point, and that's kind of cool, but it quickly descends into extremely dumb and extremely silly, which is fine to an extent if that's what you're going for, but not 2 scenes ago you were talking about a repeatedly sexually assaulted woman committing suicide after her son, who was forced upon her final trial for child murder. So you know, maybe commit to a tone, just a little bit. And then skipping forward a little, we get to the final confrontation. Alice falls asleep to go and find Freddy and save her kid from him. There's an admittedly very cool MC Escher style sequence, gotta be honest, love that, great creative use of the dream world. And then a messy ending where like the future vision unborn child ghost kid gets a Freddy face and does the voice. There's something with Freddy being scared of Freddy's mom, and then Amanda Kruger takes Freddy away or something. I'll be honest, I kinda don't remember entirely what went down there, and I'd watch it again, but I don't think I'd be able to remember any more, because as of me writing this video, I've only just watched it now, so it feels like one of those things where it's just gonna leave my brain as soon as it enters. And maybe some of that's on me. Maybe I should focus harder or keep rewatching it till it all sticks in, but to be honest, I just don't want to. The important part is it's all very convoluted and messy and forgettable, and no matter how many times I see it, that's what I'm gonna take from it. The film becomes a blur the second it isn't immediately in front of me. Just this jumbled mess of occasionally good but more often bad set pieces, and then a bunch of stuff in between that I had to embarrassingly consult wikis for to remember in what order they came. One of the absolute worst in the series for sure. Even Stephen Hopkins, the guy who made it, doesn't like it, having said in a Fangoria interview that it was a rush schedule without a reasonable budget, and after I finished it, New Line and the MPAA came in and cut the guts out of it completely. What started out as an okay film with a few good bits turned into a total embarrassment. I can't even watch it anymore. And man, I don't know that putting in the gore cut out by the MPAA would help it all that much, but when the director calls its final form an embarrassment, that's pretty damning. And notice as well that when it was at its best, he only called it an okay film with a few good bits. So whether it really was those MPAA and New Line cuts that wrecked it, or maybe something else entirely, it sounds all in all like it was never really exactly destined for greatness. Well, the wagon had to fall off sometimes, I suppose. There's only so much you can milk a cash cow before it runs dry. But hey, on the bright side, it did give us Iron Maiden's track, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, and that's a song. And you know, it's not like the series can get any worse than this. Anyway, tomorrow we're doing Freddy's Dead, which has a Rotten Tomato score of 20% compared to this film's 29. Remember to subscribe to my Only Dans at the red button below for that one. Anyway, if you like this video, then let me know with a like. Please comment with your thoughts, and if you'd really like to support the channel, then you can become a patron at the link in the description and get access to some fun exclusives for your trouble. As always, I've been Dan Drambles, you're watching Wholesome Halloween 2 Slasher Season, and I will see you again tomorrow.